Hey, everybody. Welcome to Corrections Remote, because I am vaccinated, but not jacksinated, vaccinated against jackals. We are going to do corrections here in a stranger's apartment. This is basically a month's worth of corrections, because the last one we did was right before Christmas, and pretty big boner by me early on saying that the Mona Lisa was painted by Michelangelo, when a lot of you seem to think it was Da Vinci. But they're pretty hard to tell apart, those two. I mean, especially when they're not wearing their bandanas. You know who my hero and a half shell is? Botticelli. More art history flubs. We talked about Edvard Munch's Scream. I said the guy in the painting wasn't screaming, he was reacting to a scream. Very wise, well-informed Jackal sent me something I'm gonna read you right now, clarifying exactly what was happening in that painting. They wrote, in fact, Munch wrote a passage in his journal prior to the painting. I was walking along the road with two friends. The sun went down. I felt a gust of melancholy. Suddenly, the sky turned a bloody red. I stopped, leaned against the railing, tired to death, as the flaming skies hung like blood and sword over the blue-black fjord. And the city, my friends went on. I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I felt a vast, infinite scream through nature. Overdramatic, Munch. I mentioned Thomas Jefferson as an inventor, and people took issue with that. They said, I think you meant Thomas Edison or maybe even Benjamin Franklin, but I'm here to tell you, Thomas Jefferson was a very accomplished inventor. Polygraph, not like a lie detector polygraph, but where you could write a letter in duplicate because the pens were connected. This is all at Monticello, the home of Limoncello. And so the polygraph, the swivel chair was Thomas Jefferson, and the Jefferson disc, which is a CD that plays White Rabbit. There was some confusion based on something that happened in the last corrections. I was talking about the difficulty of doing a Hugh Laurie impression while he was playing House, because then I have to do an impression of a British person who's then doing an impression of an American person. And then I did a Hugh Grant. I thought Hugh Grant played Hugh Laurie. The problem there is that Hugh's too popular amongst British actors as a first name. I know the difference between Hugh Laurie and Hugh Grant. You got Hugh Dancy, Hugh Bonneville. There's a lot of Hugh. There's too many Hughs. I think Hugh is a perfect, it's a perfect British name because it sounds like what the Dowager Countess would say if she didn't know a person. Have you met Mr. Grant? Who? That's pretty good. Oh, I said that anime series Sailor Moon had been canceled, and I was assured by fans of the series that it was not canceled, it just completed the story. This was also true of NBC's sitcom Animal Practice. I said the word timbre, I pronounced it timber. I did that thing where I made the error of pronouncing it the way it was spelled. A lot of you said my Ric Flair impression was bad. It was terrible, and I want to apologize to the Flair family, Flair fans. What happened is impression camp had to go remote, and I just don't get the same instruction via Zoom. And so there's been There's been a fall off. Okay. I talked about how Ted Cruz looks like a Chewbacca. Chewbacca is not a species of creature. Chewbacca is a name. So shame on me. That was a Wookiee mistake. We also showed, when we were talking about Ted Cruz, we showed a skateboard photo for a skateboard fail. Can we throw that up real quick, Alex? And someone had the criticism they had of this picture is that the railing makes a shadow, but the skateboarder doesn't make a shadow. You know what that means? He's a Dracula. Clip It, better known as Clippy, talked about the fact that he was introduced in 1997. I was told by many of you that he was introduced in Office 97, but that came out in 1996, which seems like a correction Microsoft should be making. Okay, we were talking about how the CDC issued a travel advisory to Canada. We mentioned this in a monologue, and a lot of you said that's not a map of Canada, that's a map of Georgia. So I thought, what? Why would we put up a map of Georgia when we were telling a joke about Canada? And then I went back and I looked at the joke and I realized what happened, which is the CDC is located in Atlanta. So the graphics department thought the best representation for that joke would be to show the state that the CDC is in. Because what the graphics department often is technically correct and practically irritating. But that wasn't the worst thing graphics got me on. We talked about how there is a tree named after Leonardo DiCaprio, and that tree is dating a sapling. But then we showed a photo of a seedling, which is that's not the kind of joke we're trying to make here. Okay. About somebody hitting on a seedling. That crosses the line, and it shouldn't happen. I apologize to Mr. DiCaprio and all the tree enthusiasts out there who had to stomach that joke. Now, in normal times, of course, what would happen is I would march down to graphics, and I would have a word with them, but we can't do that right now. I'm here. I don't need to tell you that. And so instead, I set up a Zoom call with them. Now, a lot of people made jokes about the fact that you don't have to wear pants during Zoom calls. Sure, right? You don't. But the problem with graphics is, one, they don't wear pants, which wouldn't matter, except they do all their Zoom calls standing up. And they also turn their mics on before they turn on their screens. And so they make sure, you don't know what's coming, but they make sure you're watching. You know, I start the Zoom, obviously pretty angry. I'm like, all right, guys, let's get this started. And they're like, are you there? I'm like, yeah, I'm there. Let's get this going. Turn on your cameras. And then it's just like click, click, click. And you see everything. I mentioned that horse pudding, the flavor was chocolatariat. And then, well, you guys, you could see that the flavor actually says original. And that's on me because I did not give our props department enough time. I asked them to make me this horse pudding, and by the time I asked them to change the label from original to chocolatariat, it was too late. This was because it was sometimes, again, when you have meetings in person, I feel like you don't miss as much. But again, this was all done via email and text because I'm not in the office. And so when I asked them for horse pudding, they didn't just like buy chocolate jello pudding and change the label. I don't even want to say this because like if somebody from PETA is watching, I find like what they did is disturbing. I asked them for horse pudding and I got horse pudding. I don't want to talk anymore about what happened. Okay? It's been a hard week for everyone. And with that said, pretty excited to get back into the studio on Monday and keep watching, keep looking for the flubs, and let's try to make this year, 2022, the year with the fewest corrections ever. You guys are going to see me next week.